Hello, I'm Malcolm Cox, and this is your Tuesday teaching tip. It's part of a series on how to prepare a Bible lesson, a sermon, or some other teaching opportunity. Some of these ideas come from books, some from other people, and some are just my own experimentation. All of them are ways to prepare a lesson, not necessarily the way. I'd encourage you to try these things to see if they help you. We're going to be talking today about looking at the landscape. What does that mean? Well, watch on. So if you've watched the previous two episodes, you'll remember that I find it very helpful to print out the whole passage onto one sheet of A4. Then I can see the whole passage and look for repeated words, phrases and ideas and draw lines to connect those to get that visible. And then also to use a highlighter to highlight the people involved, the things involved, that kind of thing, so that we get a better picture for the things that are obvious and the things that are perhaps more hidden. Having done that, I find I can get a better idea of the flow of the events. My artistic merits may not be particularly strong, but the drawing it like this helps me to see the sequence of events. Now, having done that in portrait mode, I then also find, in terms of working on the structure of a lesson, I find it very helpful to print out the same passage but then in landscape mode. So we have the text on the left-hand side and then a blank second half of the page where I'm going to be looking for a structure for my lesson. Of course, that structure depends on the passage, and it also depends on who I'm speaking to and the context. But nonetheless, printing it like this helps me to see perhaps alternative structures. So, for example, we've already found that at the beginning, Jesus is giving orders to cross to the other side of the lake. And so to me, this is a possible introduction. We could have one possible structure here, where you have an introduction, just that first verse. We would probably refer to the fact that earlier on in chapter 8 there's been many healings. Now it appears that that's done for now, and there's going to be a bit of a hiatus before the end of the chapter. We have the casting out of the demons from the two demon-possessed men. So as the context, he's giving orders to cross to the other side of the lake, and then he has these two encounters with a teacher of the law and a disciple. So one possible structure would be to split up these two men, and we'd have, if you like, our first point to do with the teacher of the law, and then the second point could be the disciple who wants to bury his father. Possibly that as a transition verse here, then he got into the boat and his disciples followed him, so that would be a transition to a third point. And a possible third point is the storm and the rebuke of the disciples and of the wind and the waves, and that would be our third point, something to do with the storm and faith, followed by a conclusion here with that final question. What kind of man is this? The wind and the waves obey him. So there's one possible structure, but it's not the only possible one, is it? And I like to do it like this to see. For example, as well as well, I think we'd also have that as introduction, perhaps that first verse. Not only that, you could have 4 points, I think. You could have the first would-be disciple, the teacher of the law, the second would-be disciple, the one who wants to bury his father, but then the third point, you might split this, and after a transition section, have this part, point 3, be the point where they get into the boat and they endure the storm and wake him up. And you could split that and have a fourth point here, because you could have a point about the fact that they were unprepared and they were scared, and that's part of being a disciple. And then fourth, another part of being a disciple is to have one's faith challenged. So that's another possibility. You could have not 3 points but 4 points. Perhaps that fourth point includes the last verse, and your conclusion would simply be to summarize points 1 to 4. That's an option. The structure that I actually used in the most recent time when I preached this passage was to have that first verse as an introduction and then only to have 2 points. And the reason I did that is because I think all of this, in a sense, is pre-boat, and all of this is in boat. The 2 encounters with the would-be disciples are before the boat, and then afterwards is all in the boat. And I think that, to me, makes sense of the passage strongly. You do have subpoints here with the first teacher of the law. I think is overconfident. Is how it looks to me. He's saying, I will follow you. Of course, Jesus called his disciples to him, but he's calling himself into this group. I think he's overconfident. He lacks humility. The second chap wants to bury his father. I would say that he is hesitant. He knows he needs to go, but he's not sure. And the challenge to him is to make Jesus a priority. The challenge to this fella is to have greater humility and trust, I suppose one could say. So I think it's all one point. It's about following without reservation. It's about trusting Jesus without reservation. It's about letting him set the agenda if you're going to call him Lord. And the 2 different people have overconfidence and are hesitant. I think in the second section, when the disciples are in the boat, then we have some similar issues, in fact, about faith and trust, but from a different perspective. You have it's all about Jesus, really, more than the disciples. I think he does rebuke the disciples. They're in the boat with him, but it's more, this is about the disciples, and this is about Jesus. Of course, there's a connection, but it seems to me it's more like that. So what do we learn about Jesus? Jesus is always at peace. He's asleep on the cushion. He knows doesn't have to be anxious. The disciples are anxious. And then we find that not only is he at peace in the midst of the storm, but also his actions reveal him to be deity, connection with the Psalms there. So these to me are perhaps the subpoints, something about his peace, something about his deity. We have 2 subpoints here, 2 subpoints here, and the conclusion is, what kind of man is this? That question mark. And for our audience, perhaps, what kind of man is Jesus to you? That's the big question. What is he? Who is he, actually? What and who? So I like to put this on one sheet of A4 again, because I can see it all. I like doing it this way around as landscape, because I can experiment with different structures and ask myself which does justice to the text, but also which works best in the context in which I'm going to be teaching this passage. I hope this is helpful. Let me know your questions or your own ideas about how you discover the best structure for a lesson when you're teaching. So there you have it, looking at the landscape. I hope it was helpful. At least give it a go and try it yourself. And if you have other ideas or questions about preparing a Bible lesson, please send them in to me and we'll see if we can deal with them in future episodes. Until the next time, I hope you have a tremendous Tuesday and a wonderful week. God bless.